everybody doing? Welcome aboard for the next hour or so. I'm be your host with special guest Ray, the GreenDoc of Hawaii. I missed. There it is. Get some noise in here. 3 cheers for Ray, everybody. 3 cheers for Ray. How's everybody doing? I hope you've had a good weekend. I apologize to all the Chiefs fans. I was not really interested. I'm not interested in watching Tom Brady win again. It's like watching an Alabama football game. Just not into it. Typically, everything I'm a part of is on the losing side of things. Sports, life, whatever it is. Rest in peace, Carbon Earth. Sorry, I'll put a hat on if you want to grab one from the other room. All right. Let's get this bad boy going. Ray, are you there, sir?
I'm here.
Excellent. I think I've got my board figured out where it's not going to be so oppressively over the top today. So for those people that are watching, just make sure all the levels sound good and whatnot. I realized I was coming a little hot. I was peaking there for a minute. I heard the clipping in my headphones, so we'll figure it out. Ray, everybody's giving me a hard time about my hair. I look ridiculous.
How so? It's like, is everybody giving you trouble about your hair? Why?
I don't know. I think because it's falling out and I've got like this one little tuft right here that's standing straight up. I was wearing a hat all day today and then I took it off to do this and I probably need to put it back on. It looks terrible.
You have hat head.
I've got hat head. on an unreal level. It looks terrible. But that's okay. We're on we're on YouTube, so does it really matter? No, it doesn't. Well, Ray, I appreciate you joining me today. For everybody that's at home, and this is your first time tuning in, welcome aboard the Soul Train. We're going to have a great little live show today, and the way this typically works is this is an open format, meaning you ask questions, and we will provide answers to the best of our abilities. Now, a couple caveats here is that, number one, we are human. I am fallible. I don't know about Ray. That's still up for debate. But I am prone
I'm fallible too. I'm fallible too.
I'm prone to misspeak or state things inaccurately. So always fact check. Fact checking is a good practice in general. And if you find something that you believe to be good information, then stick with it. That's always kind of a general rule of thumb too. I've got visitors. A hat has suddenly appeared, and it's a Connor Ward Lawn Rebel hat. So there we go. Look, I've got a GCI Turf shirt on. I got a Lawn Rebel hat on. Look at this. I am really sporting it tonight. So, like I was saying there, we will do our best to answer questions as accurately as possible, but do understand, we do make mistakes from time to time, so it just happens. But the way this also works is you ask questions in the chat, so feel free to go ahead and start throwing questions into the chat. We will kind of take them first come, first serve. If you have a soil test or something that you would like us to analyze, feel free to send that over as well. Oh man, somebody said they were going to send me a soil test earlier, and I'm checking right now, and it did not arrive. Let me see if he is still in here. Hang on. I'm gonna type him a little message, Ray, so that way we can get it in here. Let me make sure I gave him the right email address. thegrassfactor@gmail.com. Yeah, so if you'd like us to review one of those things, feel free to send it over, thegrassfactor@gmail.com. I just threw it up in the chat. and we'll take a look at things. That's what we like to do. We like to analyze those things, come up with different ideas, different strategies, all kinds of different stuff to get a better understanding of how to attack certain types of different things. But we'll go ahead and get this show on the road. By the way, Telecoleman, you were first, sir. You were first. Ray, so Telecoleman actually said, I have new Bermuda sod laid dormant in December, was overseeded with rye from the sod farm. Sod is not 100% rooted. What to do with pre-emergent, and when does one kill off the already half-dead rye, and what with? It was kind of a three-parter question there.
Well, number one, you do what you have to do post-emergently to that newly laid sod. Only thing I would tell you to do is probably lay off of the image until your sod is totally rooted and the turf is out of transition. And number two, I'd also think about very low rates of prodiamine if you are going to use a pre-emergent on it.
This is one of those situations that I do not enjoy being in, right? When you have new sod that is clearly not rooted or not rooted well, where you give it a little tug, it comes up, but your start of the season is coming on and you're like, golly, do I risk it? How big of a risk am I willing to take on this side? With Bermuda, I tend to get a little riskier than the rest, right? I know you're not 100% averse to risk, but you tend to take the safer approach to things, except when it comes to herbicides. So that's why I would pose this to you. If you went over there, you gave it a little tug, you see some feeder. Here's the other thing too, Ray. I'm going to really just throw some variables out there to encourage people to think about the different ways to approach this. What if the roots that you see actually pushing through the sod are from the perennial ryegrass and not from the Bermuda?
Oh, then I would actually wait a bit on the pre-emergent, and I would even look at as soon as possible and as soon as your conditions permit, transition that darn sod out of rye. That is important because the rye will hold back the rooting of the Bermuda.
Yeah. So I just thinking about this, kind of thinking it through as we talked, initially my first thought was, well, I'll just go ahead and put prodiamine on it and not even worry about it. But the more we started talking, I started thinking about it and I was like, well, wait a second. What if that's the rye? Because, this is the piece that I know that you're probably not super familiar with right now, Ray, is that it's been cold. It's been real cold. We just went through a real cold patch here, a real cool weather trend. And because of that, and especially with it just being late in December, we had the big heavy snow at Christmas. We've had a few snows actually since then, which is rare for us. And it's not just been like 0 degrees outside, but, we've been dipping down into the mid or upper 20s pretty consistently. So the fact that is overseeded with rye, 100%, that's what I would do is maybe an application of something like Monument out of the gate.
Mm-hmm. Transition it.
Yeah.
Transition it. And then other thing I'd be doing, again, is as soon as possible, when you see active growth, is I would be pushing growth on the sod itself. Because, Matt, for me, if I get sod installed between December and March, even here in Hawaii, it is really dicey as to whether that sod grabs the ground at this time of the year for me too.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I have a failed piece of my history where I have done things before that I would consider a little bit too aggressive. It was one of those things where it was sodded in probably October, and when it went down, it still was green. It went dormant at the end of October. and it never did really root well. And I was so concerned about how much money I was going to have to spend on Revolver or Monument or whatever I was going to go after the POA post-emergently with, that I was like, you know what? I'll go ahead and I'll be a little bit aggressive with my pre-emergent. So I did an application of simazine and then followed by prodiamine a little later. I did not give it the tug test before I put the prodiamine on, but I was only putting down a half pound of AI. Nothing crazy, right? Mm-hmm. The following spring, I skipped the first of my split application. I put down another half pound of AI as it was greening up. And I started tugging on it and realized that it was not rooted down well at all. And, you know, it rooted so sporadically that spring that it was terrible. That there was a large portion of it, I'd say it was 10,000 square feet aside, maybe altogether, not in a single patch, but in tufts here and there, you know, maybe 500 square feet of it never did turn green. That then it became a grow-in at that point. You know what I mean? And yep. I still think about that to this day. And that was a long time ago. It was probably like 10 years ago. But I still think about it to this day that I should have just backed off. I should have just backed off, waited till it turned green. That way I would have known without a doubt if it was just the dormancy coming out of dormancy was the definitive factor there that delayed green up and caused the issues with green up, or was it my pre-emergent application that ended up causing the problems?
You know, I would suspect that it was definitely the prodiamine. And one more little note is, if you're not certain of the status of the roots, your safer bets for, you know, non-rooted or turf grass that you do want to make root, and this is on Bermuda or Zoysia or St. Augustine, is simazine is relatively harmless, and so is oxidizone or Runstar, but that is only if you are doing this on a golf course or sports field. It is not for home lawns.
That's right. That's right. Oxidizone is a lifesaver in the sports turf world. I don't care what anybody says. It's one of the best of the best.
It is the best. It is absolutely the best. But in this case, if I were worried about the spring weeds, I would literally be putting down some simazine to buy me time until the turf can tolerate actual prodiamine. Because if you apply simazine in the spring, just know that it will only last approximately 45 to 60 days.
Yeah, that's the disadvantage of simazine and atrazine. Effective, but short-lived. And I think while we're on the topic of risky herbicide applications, let's talk about pre-emergent applications on St. Augustine and Centipede, specifically split rate applications of Spectacle on those two turf types.
Wow. Okay. If I were to do a split on St. Augustine with Spectacle, I'd be keeping my rates down to, say, 2.5 to 3 ounces of that product per acre, no more.
That was what I was going to say, was 3 ounces per acre. But that's a total shot in the dark there. I don't know that to be fact at all. So, but that's what you think you would feel comfortable with?
That's actually what I would apply over the top of St. Augustine right now. Is I just, as I said, I keep my rates extremely low. And in the case of St. Augustine, my preference is actually not to use Spectacle at all if possible. There's better things to use on it. I mean, this is a case of just because it can doesn't mean that you should.
Yeah, and I'll let that actually kind of transition into the next question, which is what is the difference between coastal and Spectacle? And actually, I believe the question was, is coastal and Spectacle similar or the same thing? And so while we're talking about spectacle, I think this is a great time to kind of discuss those differences because they are wildly different.
Well, they're totally different because coastal, for those of us who are not familiar with it, coastal is a premix of prodiamine, imazaquin, and simazine. And imazaquin and simazine both have some post-emergent effect. They are also working on totally different modes of action from spectacle as well. And I would consider coastal relatively safe on something like St. Augustine, provided your rates are at the lower end of the label amount.
So you feel confident that a product like Coastal, would that be safer on something like St. Augustine than Spectacle, or safer on Centipede than Spectacle?
Sure, because back when it was legal for me to apply simazine in Hawaii, I actually used to use some rather high rates of both imazaquin and simazine on both Centipede and St. Augustine for weed control. I used to do it.
As a product, those I like Coastal. I love the 3 modes of action in a single mix there. Personally, I'm the nerd that would rather roll my own than pay that sticker price because I'm just weird like that. That's me. But as for ease of use kind of thing, I think it's a great thing to get started with, and kind of an all-in-one, knock it out of the park kind of deal there.
Yeah, just get it done because let's see, simazine is hard to come by in small amounts. That's fact of the matter because last time I bought some, it came in a 10-pound bag of 90% dry flowable granules.
Oh boy! Wow, I haven't seen that in a long time.
Oh, that's because with simazine being a post-patent product, manufacturers like I think what Drexel.
That was Drexel, wasn't it? Didn't Drexel have the dry flowable too?
Yep, they definitely have the dry flowable and the DS, and that's the one that I used to use all the time.
Interesting.
Because the DS was just handy, and it wouldn't brick up on me when the temperatures fluctuated between hot and cool. So in other words, I could just put it into a 5-gallon pail, slam down the lid, and it would stay there forever.
And while we're kind of on the topic of herbicides here, this is an interesting one. Johnny Fescue said he has a new customer. It is a 4-acre estate, has 21 ducks that free range the property. Are you aware of any herbicides that would either be safe or an absolute no-no with free-range ducks on the property? This I don't know.
There's actually nothing I can think of that would be labeled for residential turf that would be bad for the ducks. Nothing. I mean, nothing you use, because, by the way, one of the main reasons for a lot of the old active ingredients going bye-bye was their toxicity to migratory fowl, birds.
Interesting.
Yeah. So whatever we can currently legally apply to a lawn right now has negligible to no effect on birds. And in fact, I don't worry about it anymore, whereas in the old days, I'd literally worry about watering in an application before the birds started, coming onto or even landing on the lawn, because I'd worry about killing the birds.
Yeah, I'm really racking my brain on something here, and I'm not coming up with anything that is going to be avian sensitive. So,
Yeah,
I think you're going to be all right, Johnny. And to be honest, I wouldn't say they're just free range ducks, but I've sprayed many properties before with ducks coming and going, especially geese. Geese is normally what I had to deal with. So much so that Ray, have you ever seen it where they put up like between the lake and the start of their property, they'll put up like a string 12 inches off the ground, and supposedly it keeps the geese from coming onto their property. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I've heard of that. I've also heard of a trained border collie stationed at the golf course to run off the birds. I mean, I've heard of that kind of stuff too. So
yeah, that would be a good one. That would be a good one.
So yeah, there's precedent for it, and but otherwise, that speaks to the fact that in most cases, our agronomic practices are not harmful to wildlife. They're not.
We are really running hard on the herbicide questions here. So I'm just gonna keep going with these, and then we can move back into some fertilizer stuff that's also coming in. But asking about ethofumicate as a post-emergent weed control versus POA, and it does not specify whether that's trivialis or annua, but in the Pacific Northwest, put down some in the fall as part of a pre-emergent. Would it be better to hit it with glyphosate if any pops up? Or would it be better to use ethofumicate or POA constrictor? Or what is the other name for it? There's POA constrictor. There's Progress. Yeah, is the other trade name for it. In my opinion, here, I would definitely be using ethofumicate as a post-emergent weed control in the spring versus reaching immediately for the glyphosate. It's going to be a multiple application thing. Do not get sucked into believing that you can go out, spray a little bit of ethofumicate in a single application in the spring and get 100% control. Anything you want to add to that, Ray?
No, nothing I can add other than the fact that when you get into ethofumicate or POA constrictor or ethofumicate 4SC, it is never going to be a single application type program. The idea of that ethofumicate application is to keep on applying it and gradually building up a soil residue of it, as well as a cumulative contact effect on your target weed to the point that your weed is eliminated. And if you are using ethofumicate 4SC or POA constrictor, very important that you pair the application with something like methylated seed oil to ensure that it penetrates the emerged grassy weeds. Because I had a conversation with my beer people 2 or 3 years ago, and I asked them, why did you discontinue Progress 4SC? And Lawrence told me the reason why they dropped it is because people were complaining to them that the 4SC didn't work post-emergently against the labeled weeds. And the reason why it didn't work is because those guys were not pairing it with a surfactant. So now the only backed by Bayer product that contains ethofumicate is the Progress 1.5 EC. And I got to tell you, you know how I dislike the smell of Revolver?
Yeah, which is strange to me because I love Revolver.
Okay. I dislike the smell of Progress 1.5 EC even more. So you see, there's something about solvent-based products that I'm just not into, and I think that comes from the fact that I come from a time when all of our herbicides and insecticides were formulated with a combination of naphtha and what's called benzene isomers. In other words, petroleum solvent. So I just can't stand the smell.
I like those. I like that. I don't know. And there's something beautiful about when you mix Revolver and water. It just sprays differently. You know what I mean? Revolver sprays differently than your other herbicides, and I love that. Same with Progress. Yeah, there's some solvent based materials that when you spray, it's different and it's beautiful and it's even and there's no drift. It's beautiful. I love it.
You know why?
Why?
You know why? It's because that oil and water emulsion then makes the spray, as it's coming out of a flat fan nozzle, turn into uniform but small droplets. They're uniform though. So they're all within a certain, I want to say, like if you push it through a normal fan nozzle at a reasonable pressure, they all start to fall into that, 250 to 300 micron range.
Yeah.
But that's the property of that oil and water emulsion that is created. And ironically, do you know why I like to add methylated seed oil to a lot of my tank mixes?
To form that emulsion?
To form that emulsion, because that also starts to make my spray droplets a little more uniform. And then this product that I use quite a bit because I have a nutrient outlet on the island is this nutrient distributed methylated seed oil that has a high percentage of lecithin dissolved in the methylated seed oil. They call it Liberate. And because lecithin is heavy and waxy and viscous, that serves to further enlarge the spray droplets, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And while we're kind of on the topic of methylated seed oil, Dave Hensel asked what chemicals do and do not pair well with methylated seed oil.
Okay, here's what pairs well with methylated seed oil. A lot of your products that are sulfonylurea herbicides, that pairs well. Ester-based products such as Speed Zone or Triclopyr pairs well. What absolutely doesn't pair well with methylated seed oil is glyphosate, because glyphosate is an example of a herbicide that is absolutely insoluble in any kind of oil or solvent-based material. In fact, I tell you all the time, I wish I had something called glyphosate ester. I wish there was such a formulation.
Yeah, I think you're not the only one that wishes they had access to that. I firmly believe a lot of the issues we're running into right now could at least be alleviated if we did have an ester-based formulation, especially if you hit the market like right now.
Yeah. And my only reason for wanting a glyphosate ester is I would use that for non-sprayed applications to certain weeds. Like, for example, can you imagine glyphosate as a paint-on, or how's this for crazy? Because I know Ryan in Ohio, he showed me this advert for 2,4-D on a wax bar. And you can do that with 2,4-D because the 2,4-D ester is soluble in wax, right?
Yeah. Fat soluble.
And right. So if you had like glyphosate on a crayon like that, imagine how selective and directed you could make your application. Like, say you have a weed that has popped up in a flower bed and it's like big and gnarly and obnoxious. Just go over there with that wax stick and rub it over that weed and stand back. Yeah. I mean, so it's, but then the whole point is that the current formulations of glyphosate do not mix with oils. And what will typically happen if you try to mix glyphosate with an oil type surfactant is that oil will film over that leaf and act as a barrier to the water soluble glyphosate from getting into that leaf. That's exactly what happens.
Let's transition away from herbicides for a hot second here. Lambert asked, grub control, is acelepryn worth the cost over imidacloprid?
If it's legal to use in your state, I'd say I would rather use the acelepryn over imidacloprid.
Yeah, it is that much better. One, the environmental impact is going to be so much less. Two, there are fewer instances of breakthrough or resistance, however you want to word it. You're going to see much less of that with acelepryn than you will with imidacloprid. Imidacloprid, for me, in the markets I've worked in, has gradually become less and less effective over the years. It just doesn't pack the same punch that it used to. So, in this particular instance, I would definitely be going out with acelepryn over imidacloprid. And for those of you that are unaware, imidacloprid is being removed from the residential market. So just be prepared. It's going away, going bye-bye.
Yep. And I might also add that the acelepryn picks up a different spectrum of pests as well, because if I had unlimited use of acelepryn in my state, I wouldn't be crying to you, Matt, about what I call the cane corso situation, because acelepryn is extremely effective on fall armyworm.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You're definitely going to get some fall armyworm activity out of it.
No, you get excellent fall armyworm control, and like the Syngenta people were talking to me about how if I were to be able to go out with like 4 ounces per acre of acelepryn, I could get literally like 3, 4, 5 months of fall armyworm control out of that application. And that's huge for me because that's almost half a year here.
Yeah. And especially Lambert is in South Alabama, so I think that would be just a prime opportunity and location to use acelepryn. So that would definitely be my recommendation for that area as well. Another question here. It says, how many applications of fertilizer do you recommend per year for cool season tall fescue in Kentucky, bluegrass lawn in New Jersey? The Benjamin ZBT, the easiest thing to do is use something like the climate appraisal form and determine what your nutrient removal rate will be, and then make applications based on that. And you can hedge to the side of less if you are at lower heights of cut, say like real heights of cuts, and hedge at the side of higher if you are at higher heights of cut. I have a copy of the climate appraisal form with some manipulation involved in it where I've kind of made some changes to it. If you go to subvertnpk.com/program planner, you'll have it right at your disposal right there. Let's see. Is there any reason why you would spray prefix by itself if you weren't using prodiamine on a property? So you're talking about nanosilica and peptides combined with a little bit of fulvic acid. So again, it's going to function as a biostimulant, and anytime you're looking to delay the onset of abiotic stress or fight abiotic stress or fight against the sloughing of the roots as you transition through the seasons, then it would ultimately be a good fit for there. It doesn't have to be only applied with prodiamine. The other thing too I would recommend is that the hotter it is outside, you back your rate down too. That's kind of a thing I learned in the lab the hard way, of course. Ray, going to kill my tall fescue this summer for a full renovation this fall. Is using urea to grow the weeds after I smoke it with glyphosate and kill those weeds with glyphosate a good idea? It sounds like the idea here is to fallow the ground with glyphosate applications and urea.
Yep, I would actually do that. I mean, that's a highly recommended.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
Feed the weeds, and of course, one of my friends in the business, he's watching me, do what I do, and he's like kind of this nice big guy, and he's standing over me and says, "Okay, Ray, I see what you're doing. Make them fat." That's what he says. Make them fat. I mean, just make them fat before you get them. That's exactly what he says.
So, go ahead. I was going to say, no, I would not do that because I would not want to spend the money on it. Maybe on the first application or something like that, having a little additional ammonium sulfate in the tank when I make that application would be good enough for me, typically. But here you'll kind of hear at the opposite ends of the spectrum. That's why I like having Ray on, is because I knew that is totally something Ray would do. And I'll tell you an example of exactly how that does end up working. A kudzu job where doing a glyphosate and triclopyr application, but getting out there and fertilizing it with urea on the front end before you make that application just led to so much of a better kill of the kudzu than you could see areas that had been missed with the urea, where it had been missed with the nitrogen prior to making that application. So there is definitely some very valid scientific reasoning behind doing it, but you have to ask yourself: is it in the budget to do that? I guess would be the other way to put it.
Yeah, is it in the budget, or what is your consequence of not getting optimum weed control? Like, for example, I often don't have a panic after I do, say, a sod or a sprig job, because what I do before I even get to the point where sod or sprigs is being delivered to the property is I have gone through a process of fertilize, kill, fallow, fertilize, and kill. So by the time I get to the putting down grass stage, I'm not even worried about weeds anymore. I'm not even worried that much about weeds.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just
it can come on you fast, and if you're we can't gas the soil anymore. So if you're really looking for a clean start from the get-go for establishment purposes, then fallowing is the way to go. And the more effort you put into your fallow, the better results you're going to end up getting. So makes sense.
Yeah, that's just absolutely why. And my preference is actually to deal with all of the hard to control stuff like nutsedge, kailingas, and grassy brush before I have sod down or before I have sprig down, because dealing with it after tends to make you look like the idiot or the fool.
It plants seeds of distrust. It plants seeds of distrust. And you only get so many opportunities to plant a seed of distrust before it turns into a viable plant. And then all of a sudden you've lost faith from your customer. And then it's no longer a healthy relationship. It becomes toxic relatively quickly, and you get questioned on everything you do. You get questioned about why am I being billed this much, and it creates a spiraling effect downward, and it's going to end one or two ways. Either they're going to call and cancel, or you're going to end up canceling them because you just realize that the relationship is gone. It's no longer redeemable. So cut your losses, be done with it, move on, go on, with your life or so on.
Go on. And my other point too is I've been in situations where people are pushing on me saying, man, when are you going to get the sod delivered? When are you going to get the sod delivered? And I circle them back and I tell them, not yet, because I know I'm making you a little mad right now because I'm making you wait. But I know exactly how upset you're going to be with me if I put the grass down before it's ready. Everything under the sun comes up, and now you have a mess to clean up where I'm not even sure that I can necessarily rescue those kind of situations without some extreme measures. So I always go back to, furthermore, a lot of people, they don't remember or own when they pushed on their turf install person to hurry it up. They don't remember when the dumpster fire starts. They almost never own it. They are always saying, "Oh my God, the weeds, the weeds, the weeds." But then, when I'm in those situations, and I'm not the one that ordered the sod to be installed or the sprigs to go down, I then ask them, how come this sod or these sprigs were put down right now? Your ground was nowhere near ready. It was not ready.
Ray, I have sent you a soil test. I'm going to throw this up on the screen, so take your time in reviewing this.
Let me check this out.
And this is a let me make sure there's no identifying features here. Okay, there's not. And again, this is another. This is a ion exchange resin my soil test. And I'll tell you, Ray, kind of interesting. I was doing a little bit of digging around on the ion exchange method the other day, and I found the PhD that is like the I'm going to say inventor of sorts of the ion exchange resin. And it actually began as a master's, as his, it was either his master's thesis or his PhD dissertation. I can't remember which, but it's pretty interesting because they were actually using it for nitrogen modeling, right? That was kind of the original idea, was to figure out exactly how much nitrogen was going to be available in the soil at a given period of time. And for those of you that are listening, if you are getting a soil test and getting a soil test to measure nitrogen levels, that is widely regarded as don't do that. Because nitrogen is cycled through in the soil relatively quickly. So therefore, it's hard to get an accurate representation of what your true nitrogen levels in the soil, depending on the time after your application, and how is that actually going to influence your other nutrient availabilities too, right? Because if you just applied a 24-0-11 and then you test 2 weeks later, of course, everything's going to be skyrocketed in your nitrogen and potassium, or versus if it's been 8 weeks since your last application and you're testing it again, you're going to get a totally different figure. If you're coming out of a dormant period into the growing season, you're probably going to have higher organic matter, and you're probably going to have a little bit bigger flush of natural nitrogen release in the spring, just because of the accumulation of organic matter that's now going to go through mineralization and release, right? So typically, I would say 99% of soil tests that are regularly used in turfgrass, you do not look at nitrogen as anything you should really pay attention to, because you're going to be applying nitrogen to the demands of the plant, to the growth demands of the plant, right? And again, that's when I kind of go back and talk about things like the climate appraisal form to estimate your nutrient removal rate over a given period of time based on your historical weather data over that same given period of time. So I don't know. It was just interesting. I started reading through it. It's very long, so it's a lot to dissect. I think it's like 160 pages or something. So I'm going to have to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, probably over the period of weeks instead of a period of a day or so. You know what I mean? To fully absorb all that information. Now, needless to say, what we have here is a soil test that's come up, and I thought this would be a good one to look at. He said the lawn was in very poor condition. Actually, I'll tell you exactly what he said. Just moved into the house. Everything on the test was low. N was low. P was low. K was low. And curious, what was he asking? Oh, his calcium being at 1046 when it should be around 300. Now, I will tell you that immediately when I saw this, when I saw that that 1046 of calcium when it should be 300, I remembered that the recommended range for this ion exchange resin is 300 parts per million. And I will tell you that any other soil test in America that you get, 300 parts per million of calcium is considered critically deficient at that point. So why the recommendation here? I don't know if this is even a parts per million when it states that the recommended range is 314, right? That surely can't be parts per million, right? Because that, according to MLSN or even sustainable levels of nutrient, SLAN, that is considered critically deficient, and it's hard to be critically deficient with MLSN even. So I don't know what this value represents, so it's hard for me to make a recommendation on it. But he said his level was 1046. This test I'm looking at right here is 479.28. But again, because there's no real information for me to pull from to understand what that value actually is. That's what it says is soluble and available to the plant, right? Is kind of the basis behind the soil test. That's what's plant available. Well, if that's the case, again, that's not necessarily a bad thing to have all that calcium available. At least your plants are not going to be calcium deficient. But then we start looking into the pH, right? And pH is a little bit high. So, you know, what to do around there. And of course, we're also extremely high in sodium. So I don't know. I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. Every time I talk about the ion exchange resin, or you talk about the ion exchange resin, Ray, people are beginning to get madder and madder about it for some reason. So anyway, when you take a look at this, what is your immediate visceral reaction and thoughts? And as you've had a chance to dissect it here, that's really why I was talking so much.
Okay. First of all, what's standing out to me is, you see this high sodium level? That is unusual, and I'm trying to put together in my mind how the sodium could get so high. And for me, one thing that I consider, and I know I always tell people this, is when they're dealing with a soil sample, I tell them, please, please, please do not handle or touch the soil sample with bare hands, because the salts on the surface of your skin are enough to throw off the results of a soil test. One thing. And second thing that kind of comes out at me, of course, is how low your potassium, phosphorus even, sulfur, and magnesium are, if the results of this test are even to be believed.
Yeah, and pretty much across the board. And in terms of rectifying that, I mean, there's nothing really out of the extreme here. This is one of those beautiful things where you could apply 1-to-1-to-1. Well, I do know it was Bermuda grass, a 1-to-1-to-1, and then a micronutrient package. And I mean, literally, you're going to be doing exactly what you need to be doing, and you could make that your standard fertilizer app. Now, The one caveat I would give you in this particular instance is that if you're going to use a micronutrient package, make sure it's fully chelated. Do not apply. And this is the other thing I see people getting up in arms about is that, oh, I've got a triple 13 with micronutrients, and you look at it and none of it's chelated, and you're like,
it's all what sulfates and oxides as the micronutrient source. Let's see, and it's even like in token amounts. I mean, I actually hate that when I see stuff added to the bag that then enables the distributor or seller of that to jack up the price of that 1-to-1-to-1 because, oh, I put micronutrients in it. Yeah, but you put hardly enough for it to matter because how come even after I use this, I'm still spraying chelate?
Phosphorus and non-chelated micronutrients do not go well together. And this is one of those things that I don't know. Maybe it's something I should replicate in a lab, Ray, just to show what exactly happens, because it's the same thing that will happen in your soil effectively. That if you're applying a non-chelated micronutrient source to the soil, it will form an insoluble precipitate with your phosphorus, or it could even react with calcium in the soil. It's not fun. And it will literally turn into jelly or become a solid mass. You can kind of pick your poison in that regard, in that vein. So,
yep. And I know how supposedly in these fertilizers they keep it from forming an insoluble mess in the bag is the micronutrients are in the form of separate granules in the bag that I guess are coated to prevent them from reacting with the phosphate. I've seen it. And it's always in the form of these small little brightly colored granules that are, added to, say, granulated MAP and granulated muriate of potash and granulated urea, because a lot of your bulk blended fertilizers are based on those three components. So there.
Hang on one second here, right? This is odd. For whatever reason, the Subvert website just went down. That's kind of odd. Somebody just messaged me about that. I have no idea how that happened, but you know what? We'll get the IT team on it.
Yeah, get your IT team at it.
Yeah, which is for the joke is that's me. And I have no idea what I'm doing, so I'm going to have to. I'm gonna have to probably reach out to the Discord IT guys. This is funny, Ray. Speaking of chelated micronutrients, there is someone who has joined the live stream right now under the name I Want Feature. And for those of you playing along at home that do not know what Feature is a fully chelated iron and manganese source that contains specifically EDDHA chelation. And the benefit of EDDHA chelation is the fact that it is stable in a soil pH of 9. Here's the other fun fact about EDDHA chelation is that it's also stable with phosphorus. It's also stable with calcium. So if you're going to be applying something that contains phosphorus, what a great micronutrient package to apply alongside of it, because it would be stable in that regard.
Yep, because I literally paint mix Feature with either soluble triple 20 or else calcium nitrate, and I don't form insoluble precipitates or turn that thing into a brick in my sprayer.
Yeah. Again, that's something I'm just going to have to do to show what happens there when you take a non-chelated source. Yeah, it's not a good thing. It is nasty. It makes for big problems, and nobody ends up happy doing that. So if you're looking for a fully chelated micronutrient source, you can go to what is the website? I want feature dot squarespace.com, something like that. Is that what it is?
Yep. Yeah, you go there, or if you're in the business, you can go see your nutrient rep, as long as that nutrient branch also services bulk. Because nutrient is they mostly market feature to golf people, because that's the place where it's used most often. Lawn guys, other than myself, don't know what feature even is in most cases.
This is true. It's rare you see people using it outside of your wheelhouse there, Ray. You know, it's just yeah, you don't see it all the time.
Yeah. In the meantime, I have people telling me how wonderful 1200 is, and do you know what 1200 is?
Yeah, that's going to be straight ferrous sulfate.
That's ferrous sulfate, urea with a little bit of sulfuric acid in the bottle to keep it from the ferrous sulfate from crashing. That's all it is. It's nothing extraordinary. In fact, when I didn't know any better, I tried to mix a little 1200 with my standard fertilizers, and it made kind of a mess.
Been there, done that more than once, more than I care to admit. The importance of jar testing. Jar testing is one of those things that is so underrated. When people ask me, hey, can you mix this with this? I'm telling you, a jar test would be just, once you do it, you become obsessed with it, really. I mean, how often do you mix things just to make sure on the front end? I mean, that's a good time.
Oh, I mean, in my case, I'm often blending things in a 3-gallon pail, and I can see if I'm going to have a problem when all of a sudden everything falls to the bottom in that pail. That's when I know not to actually add it to the sprayer.
That's right.
Yeah.
Ray, we got another question here. I see here so many posts where folks discuss organic matter in CEC, and they lead you to believe the more, the better. What are the optimal levels of organic matter in cation exchange capacity, and why is more not better?
Okay, I can tell you that I consider between 1 and say 2.5 to 3% organic matter. That's pretty good. Plants will grow on that just fine. CEC, I like to see a CEC under 15 if possible. And the reason why you don't want a CEC that's made higher, and the reason why you don't want to see organic matter over 2.5% is because high CEC, high organic matter soils tend to act like swamp mud when you put water on them. They're poorly drained. They don't dry out fast. They're poorly aerated. And in the case of us trying to grow turf grass on them, we're also compounding our problem where that high CEC and high organic matter will literally start to bind up whatever inputs we try to apply to that soil. And when I say bind up, you make a fertilizer application, it goes down, and you have no idea if that application is even going to get back to your grass within that growing season, because then, in order for that application to be liberated and released back to the plant, that organic matter that bound up your application then has to fully decompose. So, which is why I say, do not chase organic matter, do not chase the high CEC, and in fact, some of our agronomic practices on fine turf are directed towards deliberately reducing high organic matter.
I think that's perfectly put. There's not really anything else to add to that. Yeah, thank you, Ray.
You're welcome, because I keep on seeing that on social media as well, where somebody thinks that with organic matter or CEC, the more they manipulate that upward, the better. And I'm telling you no, because, by the way, Matt, do you know when I will deliberately add a lot of organic matter to a soil or a high CEC material to a soil? Do you know when I'm going to do it?
What's that?
When somebody has messed up and they've applied a herbicide that is toxic to the desirable turf grass, and I need to bind that up or soak that up as soon as possible.
That's when you're dipping into okay, let's think about it this way. Ultra high CECs, right? Where you're thinking, the higher the CEC, the better, right? That's the direction you're going. What about activated charcoal? Yeah. What's the CECs on activated charcoal?
I would have to do a little Google foo and look that up. I just know that there's been a time or two that I've literally had to unload, cases of activated charcoal and apply that to turf grass because somebody didn't read their product label before making an application.
Yep. So if you were just purely interested in moving the CECs of the soil, go get you some activated charcoal and light it up. I mean, just get out there and have at it and feel real good about it, because you're going to move the needle aggressively and quickly. But you're not going to be pleased with the results you get from it. I'll tell you that right now.
No, because it then also starts to soak up, anything and everything. So in other words, say you do need to apply pre-emergent or fungicide or, a soil-based insecticide, like say you needed to drop down a celiprin to stop grubs. With that activated carbon or high CEC, chances are your application is going to get locked up before it actually does what you need it to do. So take care when trying to drive your CECs upward.
Ray, we got one more here. And we'll kind of save the best for last. Timmy Bluegrass sent me a copy of his fungicide plan this year, and I am going to throw this up on the screen for everybody to look at, and at least his justifications for using these individual products. So let's check and see what's going on.
All right. Okay, let's see. I see early spring application of good old azoxystrobin and propiconazole. Then I see an application of what I know as Eagle for a patch disease. And then another application for patch disease. And then next application is a dollar spot one. And here's my suggestion is on May 30th, I would cut the propiconazole out and just go to clearies. I wouldn't mix propiconazole and clearies. And I would also, I'm okay with the June application for the patch disease. Eagle, for those of us that are not familiar, that is the one DMI fungicide that I know of that has minimal to no growth inhibition effect on low-cut turf in hot weather. In other words, I'm okay applying Eagle to low-cut Bermuda or low-cut Zoysia or low-cut C. sherpaspalum at any time of the year, and I don't worry about it. And then, let's see, next application. This is a good one. Exemplar and 3336. If I were going specifically after dollar spot, I'd cut off my clearies and save it. And lastly, for another application for the summer patch, I would instead go with the cleary and the azoxystrobin, and if possible, not sure if it's a lot on the label, I would actually increase the rate of 3336 to a total of 4 ounces per 1,000 square foot rather than 2 if I'm going after what's called summer patch or the typical soil-borne patch diseases. There.
Perfect. That is absolutely perfect. And I lied. I said that was the last question. But hang one second here. There was one more. There was one more here that I feel like we kind of glossed through. Here's one. I'll kind of lob you a softball here. Sean's Midwest Lawn said potassium chloride or calcium chloride ice melters, which is easier on the lawn.
I think they're both kind of up there because of the chloride content, but it is definitely the lesser of all evils versus just putting down normal sodium chloride. So either one, either one is good, although I also know that calcium chloride is, I've heard, is the superior product when it comes to melting ice, because do you know what calcium chloride does when it comes in contact with water? For example, like a dry calcium chloride granule or pearl. Do you know what that does when it contacts water? It gets hot.
Yes, it is an exothermic reaction.
It gets hot, so that adds to the power of it as an ice melter, whereas potassium chloride in contact with water actually gets a little cold, if you can figure. So I would go for the calcium chloride, knowing that even a smaller amount of it will melt more ice versus the potassium chloride, if that makes sense.
No, it makes absolutely perfect sense. And I lied. I said there was only one more question, but I've got 2 more. At 1 pound per acre of Isosaben, how long will that rate of Isosaben last?
Depending on your climate, that is good for at least 3 to 4 months of weed control. That's what I get out of a pound of Isosaben here in Hawaii. But of course, if your soil temperatures are cooler than that, you might get as much as 6 months out of that application. But don't quote me on that. And but in most cases, people in the temperate region tend to get what I call season-long control out of that one application of Isosaben. So that means that if you put it down with your spring pre-emergent, that is a break on the weeds all through most of summer for most people.
Perfect. Perfect. Can you tell us what herbicide combo you would use to prep flowers and shrub beds before mulch?
I would definitely go for a triple if I knew the plants that were in that bed were tolerant, and my triple would actually be Isosaben, prodiamine, and sulfentrazone. That would be my triple for a flower bed, provided that, again, plants are tolerant, because there are certain plants, for example, that are not tolerant of sulfentrazone. There's also certain ornamentals that are not tolerant of Isosaben, but the best thing to do is know your shrubs and your plants and your flowers and determine if you have anything in that planter bed that is intolerant. And that's basically what I do when I'm contemplating making some kind of a herbicide application to a landscape area. Is I try to determine if I have anything in that area that shouldn't get either a pre-emergent or a post-emergent type application.
Yeah, I like that combination. I was going to say flumioxazin and glyphosate too, if you're tolerant. I think that would be a good one as well.
My only question about flumioxazin.
Go ahead.
My only question about flumioxazin is the fact that it is not that strong on sedges, and I tend to worry more about sedges in a planter bed situation, because something like, say, Monument or Certainty or any of your normal sedge herbicides is actually not very well tolerated by most ornamentals. So I kind of consider the fact that I'm in huge trouble if nutsedge or Kailinga become problems in a planted area. I keep that in mind when I'm selecting my herbicides.
Yeah,
because nuts is horrible here. It's just horrible, man.
Yeah, that is one thing I did not take into consideration. So that's a great point there. Aldo said Orizolan and Isosaben as a bed pre-emergent.
Sure can, but here's my problem with Orizolan. Orizolan was the pre-emergent that I used to use exclusively for grassy weeds between, say, 1990 till about 2000. And you know what changed about that?
What's that?
Right about 2000 or so, Dow AgroSciences sold the rights of that product to United Phosphorus in Mumbai, India. And apparently they have trouble keeping their Orizolan plant from catching fire and blowing up. Because, you refer to Orizolan, prodiamine, and pendimethalin and trifluralin as dinitroaniline herbicides, right?
Yes.
And when you add one nitrate to an organic molecule, okay, you're relatively stable. When you add two nitrate molecules to an organic molecule, you're kind of getting up there. But if you get up to 3 nitrate or 4 nitrate molecules to an organic molecule, you are basically making TNT or worse.
Yeah, boy. Ray, how is it every time we get going on this, we can always find a way to turn into some explosives?
Okay, and this is my message, because no matter how you slice it or dice it, chemicals are dangerous.
This is true. This is very, very true.
Chemicals are dangerous, and manufacture of chemicals can be dangerous. And so that's why when I found out that Dow gave Orizolan or sold Orizolan to United Phosphorus, I thought, let's see, these guys in India have precedent for making chemical plants blow up. So I wonder how well that would work, and apparently not well, because every time I ask for the Surfland flowable at my vendors, they told me, oh no, we're out of stock, back ordered, and we don't know when we're going to get any. Because for certain uses, I actually prefer Surfland over prodiamine, because I find it to be a more aggressive product. But that's if you can get Surfland or Orizolan, Aldo, go for it. I'm not sure where or how you're getting it, because I haven't been able to get my hands on a bottle of Surfland in years.
yeah, I was going to say Surfland is at this point is hard to find. Ray, I want to thank you for your time today, and thank you for carrying on the rest of that show while I have been dealing with tech support, because anyway, I hate dealing with tech support, and I hate having the website down. So thank you so much for carrying the show right there while I was handling all this in the background.
No problem, Matt.
I kept having to mute my microphone because you can hear my keyboard as I'm keyboard warrioring this poor tech support lady who's trying to help me out. So thank you so much, Ray. I really appreciate
it. Anytime, Matt. And you have good luck with that, because a crashed website just sounds like my idea of not fun.
Yeah, there's nothing fun about this, and I have a feeling I'm going to be occupied on this till midnight, of course. So thank you so much, Ray. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in at the house. And hey, we'll be back next week, same damn time, same damn place. And I don't know, maybe we'll have us a good little time unpacking some different things there. Again, thank you, Ray. All right, everybody. Y'all have a good evening. We'll catch you on the flip side.